Hi, I'm Jay Dillon. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I've lived here since I was 2 years old, and I have happily gone to school here. But I also like to bring the attention to this interview is about economic sustainability in the Santa Fe community over the ages. When I was a boy growing up here, my father had two businesses in downtown Santa Fe. And he and other businessmen and other business people saw that in the 60s and 70s there was a lot of traffic problems. It was very congested. So they got together with the city council and developed a plan to change the traffic pattern, flow, and they created the Paseo Peralta. So my family has been involved with the economics here in Santa Fe since the 60s to the current time. But I today have Nat Shipman, who is from the Santa Fe area, and I'm going to be interviewing him, and we're going to be focused on economic sustainability in Santa Fe community through the ages. Nat, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Nat Shipman, and I came into this area. My family moved here from Boston when I was less than a year and a half old. My father was hired to be the head of the Health Science Division in Los Alamos. And when we moved here, because that was right after the Manhattan Project, and the biggest house in Los Alamos was 2 bedrooms. Well, I'm the youngest of 6 kids, so that wasn't going to cut it. And so they bought a beautiful old hacienda in the Milwaukee Valley, about 16 miles north of Santa Fe. And growing up as a little Anglo in that valley, I was the minority. There was 3 Indian pueblos in that valley, and the overwhelming majority of the people were local Hispanic colonists that had been there for generations. So maybe 24 Anglo families in that valley. And so Santa Fe was always like coming into the big city for us. And there was such a long period of time there where it was absolutely the whole economic focus of this whole area, not only within the city, but all the surrounding communities. Everybody had to come into Santa Fe to do whatever it is, from buying a new car to buying lumber for a barn or whatever, groceries, school supplies, anything, that's where you found it. And so I have been here, and I've lived in Santa Fe now for almost 40 years. And I have seen all kinds of different changes, some good, some bad. Like that's the same with every community, though. And
well, could you focus on that a little bit? What are some of the monumental changes you've seen?
I don't know. I think 2 of the biggest changes that I've seen in my lifetime, and they both occurred kind of at the same time. One was in the kind of the late 60s, 70s, when St. Francis Drive was extended through Santa Fe. Up till that point, there was no such thing as kind of the tracks, if you will, the right or wrong side of the tracks. And not to say that St. Francis created that, but on the east side of St. Francis Drive, that was like old Santa Fe. The west side was all new subdivisions, that sort of thing. It had a very different kind of a flavor. Then the construction of the first mall in Santa Fe, which was the Vargas Mall, which was built about a mile from the plaza. And that opened in 1974, and when that opened, a lot of the key tenants that were on the plaza, things like Penny's, some of the real top clothing stores, shoe stores, etc., moved to the mall, creating vacancies on the plaza. When that happened, of course, a lot of the very successful, prominent galleries and curio shops, if you will, relocated to those vacant spots on the plaza. Eventually what that led to is kind of like today, where there's really not a whole lot that you actually need that you can find within a 5-block radius of the plaza, which is okay, because obviously it would be like fiestas or Mardi Gras 365 days a year down there. And because of what happened, it basically left the downtown area intact in terms of its aesthetic and historic beauty. And so for all of us locals, I know, Jay, you're the same way. I love to go downtown. I love to go down to the plaza. I love to visit the shops, restaurants, etc. around.
Well, in that, when people had commerce downtown buying products they needed, it was socializing. Families would get to see each other, talk about kids who are away at school. It was also a wonderful place for people could meet, or coffee shops,
right,
things along this line. But there was a conviviality and a friendliness as I've grown up here in Santa Fe that I've come to miss. And this is something I'd like to see if I and others can reinstate or bring back. Is when I grew up here, there were grocery stores, Safeways, Connie's, and the grocery tellers were always so nice. It was not uncommon to wave to strangers on a dirt road. I still kind of do that in certain times. But being friendly and open to unknown strangers, to me, is a very good thing. Mm-hmm. People forget it's easier to be friendly than it is to be defensive and uptight. It takes more energy to be lost in your thoughts and not so open to your neighbors. Here we are in the 21st century, and I see Santa Fe as not only a porthole in terms of historical significance, but I also see Santa Fe as a place that's been evaluated by others throughout our great country. I think a lot of people have come to see Santa Fe as just a tourist destination. Yes, it's the state capital, and so Santa Fe gets a lot of its revenue from state-related business. But Santa Fe also is a resource in terms of information and history. In the 21st century, I believe that the new commerce is quality information. And I believe that Santa Fe could be such a center where programmers, be they game programmers or software programmers, could locate here when the necessary infrastructure was done here. What do you see in this regard? Do you see that Santa Fe could be a low-tech, high-tech place?
Totally. I think that, this started way back in the late 19 teens and 20s, when all of a sudden a lot of those early people realized that probably the biggest economic engine was tourism. And so there was such a encouragement of developing that business. We saw it again in the 1980s when all of a sudden there was this explosion of this kind of nouveau Santa Fe, if you will. So when Singing Coyote came out, and,
yes.
and we had a lot of big new fancy restaurants and new hotels that were trying to jack it up to this more kind of a generic high-end tourist place, as opposed to just this lovely little town. And so that focus is still really definitely, a huge focus in this town. However, when you look what we have around us, obviously we have Los Alamos National Labs right up here, Sandia National Labs right down in Albuquerque. There's more PhDs per capita in this area than any place in the world. We also have, things like the Santa Fe Institute, which is phenomenal, gathering of incredible very brilliant people. We have the School of Advanced Research. We have so many amazing resources. This has always been a place where artistic and intellectual people are drawn. And as a result of that one, the artistic and the tourism has really been pushed. But the other aspect, the more, for lack of a better word, white-collar type of jobs, has not been pushed very well. And obviously that is largely the fault of the legislature and our politicians, both on a local city, county, as well as certainly state level. That again, the focus has been on tourism and films and art and things like that, which I'm not knocking. That's fabulous. But that whole other side has been greatly ignored. And I think all the pieces are here. There just need to be some coordination and some marketing that would encourage, make people aware.
Well, it's not we also have the Santa Fe Community College.
Exactly.
We have the Santa Fe Art and Design Institute. So Santa Fe has been an academic center. St. John's is here. Santa Fe Prep is here. So we do have an educational base here. When I talk to people who are not from this area, they say, well, we're concerned that the schools aren't very good, so we don't really necessarily want to move there because our kids wouldn't be educated as what we'd like. Mm-hmm. Well, that needs to be addressed on a very personal level. I think the mayor here is very aware of that, and that's something that people are becoming more aware of. And I think, though, that the educational level is improving. I think that this is a ripe time, here we are in 2015, to access our education centers. You just mentioned the lab, Sandia Laboratory. What's another asset that is so wonderful about Santa Fe is the natural resources here. We have the Sangre de Cristos right behind us, less than 16 miles away is the ski basin. We have hiking trails, biking trails. The river, when it does flow, is going right through the center of Santa Fe. Then there's Tasuki, which is another river. But there's a lot of outdoor activities that can be done here. Further north, up in Taos, you can do white water rafting. And I think this would be a major attraction for the Millennium group of people, those who were born in 1980 on up. And that's, for me, my focus of trying to get this information out to others, is that Santa Fe is more than just a retirement community. In my view, I think Santa Fe's been kind of labeled as just a retirement community. Tourist and a retirement community. Right. I'd like to see how that can be expanded.
Well, you mentioned, for example, what's around us, and I have a tour guiding business, and what's in an 80-mile radius of Santa Fe is unbelievable. The myriad of things you can do, not only activities. I'm just talking the amazing difference in climate zones, the incredible differences in topography, in geology. The diversity of this area is unbelievable, not to mention the cultures. And so many people come here totally unaware of the cultures that are here. Obviously, people are drawn here because of the Native American thing, and that's largely because of Hollywood. We all grew up watching cowboy and Indian movies, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's, oh, I got to go see Indians. I got to go see Indians. What people don't realize is the Spanish colonists have been here for 400 years. This is the oldest city in the United States of America. And there is almost no focus. It still isn't taught in schools.
Yes.
Anything about the Native American, the Spanish colonial history. But the thing is, I've also been an avid mountain biker for 25 years. And I've been all over the trophy places you want to ride in mountain bikes in the Southwest. Places like Moab, places like Crested Butte, Colorado, Durango, Colorado, you name it. Santa Fe has a trail system. Santa Fe has over 75 miles of single-track trails exclusively for hikers, runners, and mountain bikers here. They're as good as any trails I've been on anywhere. And the city County Chamber of Commerce does nothing to encourage that. You look at a little flea-bit town like Moab, Utah, which is now a gold mine because of the fact that it is considered like the Mecca of mountain bikers. People come from all over the world to go to Moab to ride bikes. Santa Fe could be that exact same draw. We have way more variety of riding than Moab does, for sure. We have way more variety of other things to do, as you said, whether it's rafting, whether it's in the winter, unbelievable snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, skiing. There's so many different things that people can do here. Just go out and walk around and look at petroglyphs all through our countryside. Go to Indian ruins. You cannot run out of things to do here. If you run out of things to do here, it's because you're blind and have a bag over your head.
Well, talking about petroglyphs, back in the 70s, I was an archaeologist for the Museum in New Mexico. And I heard this statistic, and I have yet to hear anything different from it. But in Santa Fe County alone, there are over 100,000 archaeological sites.
Yeah, exactly.
100,000 archaeological sites, from single room to multiple room. Back in the 12th and 13th centuries, Galisteo, the Galisteo Basin, there were 4 large pueblos out there. Each pueblo had between 15 to 2,500 people.
Right.
It's a bare area now, but that was probably deforested from the supply of lumber and timber to the pueblos. But people forget that the time period we're in, it's a little shift. It's a little look into. It's easy to think that the time period we're in is the only time period and forget about the past. Well, the past is such a a wealth of things to draw upon. There's 19 pueblos in the state of New Mexico, 4 to 5 different language groups, and they are their own. Those language groups are as different from French is to German,
absolutely,
to Italian, and people forget that. They think that everybody's speaking the same language.
Right.
They are not.
Right.
They are very diverse languages, and I also respect that a lot of the Native Americans in the pueblos, be it Taos, Tesuque, San Felipe, Santa Ana, they have a deep sense of privacy and keeping to their own. They are on their own lands, and they prefer it that way, but they've been able to maintain the integrity of their culture.
Right.
And I totally admire and, I just admire their culture and their adherence to keeping their culture. Just May 1st was the big dance down in San Felipe, where hundreds of dancers danced to honor the coming of the changes of the season, but it was also the corn dance. So we have a lot of things to access, and I love going to the Native American dances.
Well, another thing that I've found is that people just generically say Indians. Like we have a tendency to say Europeans, or we have a tendency to say Orientals. Yeah. Well, I think that the Germans and the Portuguese are a little different. Thank you.
Yes.
Or I think the Chinese and the Japanese are a little different.
Yeah.
Well, the Native American is exactly the same way. Another thing is that the Spanish colonists that came here, if you go back to the 1600s, there wasn't many ships coming over from Spain, okay? And those that were coming, there weren't a lot of women on those ships. So when they landed in New Spain, i.e. what we think of as Mexico today, obviously boys will be boys. They mingled with the locals. They procreated, and in a very short window of time, like 50, 60 years, a lot of those people, groups of those peoples, left New Spain to come up here, and they settled up here. Well, this was very isolated from New Spain, Mexico City in particular. It was really isolated from Spain. And then in the meantime, over the next 200 years, this subculture emerged, which was this Spanish melding with these native groups of not only this area, our local Pueblo Indians and other groups here, but as well as in Mexico. And so when they finally, when Mexico became Mexico in 1821, then all of a sudden, now it became its own entity, its own country. So something that always, I think, kind of irritates me a little bit is when government people or census groups, they qualify everybody as like Hispanic that have Latin blood. Well, the Spanish people or the Latin people that are living in Southern California, Southern Arizona, Southern Texas, those are Mexican Americans. Their entire heritage goes back to Mexico. Up here, their entire heritage goes back to Spain. And I know you remember this from when you were a kid, because if growing up as a kid, if I guaranteed wanted to get my butt kicked, all I had to do was call some local Spanish guy a Mexican. Oh, wow, that was not cool. That was not cool. Now, on the other hand, if you talk to a lot of the people in Southern Texas, Southern California, you call them Spanish, they get very resentful. They don't want to be called Spanish. They want to be called Mexican. And there is a very different culture. Every bit as different as, say, you put a bunch of Americans and a bunch of Brits together. Hey, we all speak the same language. Right. We all kind of look the same. Right. But sweetheart, we ain't the same.
That's right.
There's a huge cultural difference.
I think this is a major point to bring out.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
The culture diversity. Santa Fe has the tagline of the city different, which is fine. I think it served its purposes, but I'd like to see Santa Fe named the Santa Fe Diversified. Diversity to me is it's a symbol of health in nature. Diversity in nature is seen everywhere, and culturally, I think that's an aspect that needs to be incorporated and thought about. Diversity in how one lives with other cultures. They could be in big cities, here, Santa Fe, wherever. Diversity is the way of the future and how you respect it. Diversity in how other people think besides yourself. and speak, and is to me a sign of tolerance and flexibility. And Santa Fe to me has been always known as a very tolerant place for the artist, for the intellectual, and we respect each other's privacy.
Exactly.
And I personally don't like all the how people politicize privacy, sexuality, and birthrights. That's all private information.
Exactly.
That should be behind closed doors. But you were going to make another point.
Well, it's falling right on what you were saying, because this is an incredibly unique area, because you have three really, really distinct cultures, i.e. the Pueblo Indian, the Spanish colonist, colonial American, and the Anglo-American. And somehow they have figured out a way over several centuries here to not only coexist, but to actually cooperate with each other, and yet in somehow maintain their own individual autonomy, as well as garner the respect of the other two cultures. It's like a tripod is a very sturdy structure. Well, if you pull one leg out, guess what? It falls over. And a thing that really irks me so many times here is I'll hear people say, this is an amazing melting pot. Mm-hmm. No, it is not a melting pot. Right. A melting pot is where different groups or cultures come together and you all leave stuff at the door. So we all come in and we can all be kind of this one mass thing. This is not that. This is a mosaic.
Yes.
It's where you have little individual pieces, i.e. these cultures, that come together to form a picture, i.e. Santa Fe and northern New Mexico, but it's still the individual pieces. You know, you can break it all apart and put it back. And it's like, as we, I think, all agree today, that kind of, having grown up this here all my life, I can tell you that, in a sense, segregation is a natural thing. I mean, let's face it, yes, people go to school together, they play sports together, they play in band together, they cheerlead, they do community functions together, on and on and on and on and on. They date, they intermarry, all this stuff.
Yes.
However, generically speaking, at the end of the day, on the weekends, the Indians go back to their pueblos, they associate with their culture, the Spanish associate with their culture, and the Anglo pretty much meld back to their culture. It has nothing to do with any animosities or ill feelings.
It's respect for diversity.
Well, it's the fact that, thanks for the invitation for lox and bagels, but I just like enchiladas better, if you don't mind. I'm going to eat at home tonight. That's all it is. But they're so rich, and each one brings something to the table. Right. And I think the exploiting of that is a way to really richen what is here, because now instead of highlighting those things, you're kind of just trying to put it all into one ball, and you know what? It doesn't work. It doesn't work, because you can't mesh them. They are three individual entities, and you have to keep those. Keep pointing out what the wealth that each one of these cultures brings to the table.
Yes, this is phenomenal, and when you see that wealth and respect the diversity that it represents, that becomes a resource in itself, and ideally, you will be attracting people who are also seeking tolerance, diversity, expansion of consciousness.
Exactly.
Because with all of this comes consciousness. I believe personally that Santa Fe is a key place for the expansion of the 21st century consciousness, because it's based on this past history, and the consciousness meaning being aware of where we keep our thoughts and where our thoughts go. I am wandering a little bit here, but I feel that Santa Fe is such a phenomenal place to be inspired, to expand your being, your consciousness, and I get tired of Santa Fe being labeled this New Age center.
Yeah, no,
it's way more than a New Age center.
It draws a lot of people that are having on spiritual quest here. It's a phenomenal area. It is a breathtaking area. And as a result, there is a lot of people that are really drawn to this area. I mean, when you think back, when a lot of the artists came here in the first place, I mean, the original batch were people that were infected with tuberculosis.
Right.
But then also at that point in time, there was a stagnation back in the eastern seaboard. people were really getting kind of fed up with the industrialization, standardization that had kind of overwhelmed that area. And up to that point, their only outlet was Europe. Well, they kind of been there, done that. Let's read another book. Well, all of a sudden, when word starts coming back and images of what's here,
that's when George O'Keeffe moved out here
and
early
so
in the teens.
A lot of frustrated
19
intellectuals and a lot of frustrated artists were looking for something new, and they came here, and by God, they found it.
Mabel Dodge Lujan up in Taos.
And today, here we are now struggling with a lot of economic and environmental issues. And mainly because we as man, of course, always think we're smarter than anything and nature and everything else. Well, when you come back here, you have the native people, as the Native American, as well as the Spanish colonists that have been here living at one with the land for 400 years.
And they've economically sustained themselves for these hundreds of years.
And they're not killing off the lands. And so there's a lot of lessons to be learned here. And fortunately, we live in a place where we have unbelievable sunshine. We have incredible natural resources, on and on and on. That this could be like a training ground, if you will. This could be an incubator for phenomenal technologies that are absolutely going to be needed
of how to coexist with others.
Exactly. And how to coexist with nature.
Yes.
As opposed to trying to control nature and make it do what you want. I think Southern California is seeing that don't work.
No, I think California is a perfect example of when something's successful, it just tends to proliferate and expand.
Exactly.
But when the ecology starts shifting, then people have to start shifting, like the water crisis they're experiencing in California. Precisely. But was that preventable? That's always going to be debatable. But a lot of our water comes from the snowfall. Same with Colorado. California, the same thing. A lot of their water comes from the snowfall. Same here. But it's man being aware of not expanding beyond their needs and wants.
Precisely.
The Pueblos here have been here for so many years that they've lived in harmony with that.
Right.
And we can learn from that.
And the Spanish as well.
Yes.
And all the little villages that we have scattered out all throughout the state. People say, God, how did they live there? Well, what do you mean, how did they live there?
Yeah.
You just took what was given you and you made the best of it.
That's right.
You didn't try to create something that wasn't there. This isn't like I go to places like Phoenix and Scottsdale or Palm Desert, California, and you're going, what is wrong with this picture? What do you got acres and acres of bluegrass for? What do you have ungodly tropical landscaping busting up? There's no water here. This is ridiculous. Right. And so you don't see that here. You don't see that because we realize that water is limited, and obviously we've learned that through the cultures that have been here for 400 years that have taught the newcomers, i.e. this Anglo faction that is here, that, hey, you can't bank on the fact that you're going to have 10 feet of snow every April up in the mountains. And you can't guarantee that the monsoons are going to come every July and April. So you have to live within what you can get. And that kind of, the lessons that are here that obviously have been taught for a long time, generation after generation after generation, those lessons need to be taught to a lot of other people that are now coping with this. Oh my God, what do we do now? Well, come here and listen, and they'll tell you. You might not want the answer.
That's what I mean about consciousness. It's being conscious of your environment, being conscious of yourself, being conscious of others. Well, in conclusion, how would you like to wrap this up? I'd like to make an ending statement. I'd like to have you maybe make an ending statement. What's your conclusion for this? Be focused on economic sustainability in the Santa Fe area as we move forward.
I think the key in this town is the focus on, and there is actually a pretty good grassroots movement of this town on focusing on local business. There is franchise restaurants and things like that. Franchises have never been real popular in Santa Fe. I remember a Gap opened up on the plaza a few years ago. What lasted 18 months? Other franchises have tried to open up. They didn't make it. Mainly because people here, they don't want to deal with the same nonsense you can find everywhere. They like the uniqueness of it, the diversity, as we were saying. And they like actually meeting a shopkeeper or employees that have a vested interest in that business, as opposed to just being an employee.
Yes.
And so the nurturing of local businesses, the encouragement through tax incentives, whatever, and at the same time the discouragement of a lot of the big franchise, big corporate type box stores where they don't give a zip about this community. They just figure, hey, this is a good place to,
Right.
reap the the crops, and that focus. Granted, yes, that brings in gross receipts tax dollars. That's all good for the local economy, but by the same token, that same gross receipts tax dollars would be there with locally owned, locally run businesses that encourage involvement. Several of the real prominent businesses and restaurants in town, these are local. They have like profit sharing things with their employees. They have retirement plans for them. They have all of this stuff. And it's that kind of things that really builds a key business. And you will find so many locals here that when they need hardware supplies, they don't run out to Lowe's or or out to Home Depot. They go to Big Joe's. They go to Empire, because you walk in the door, hey, Jay, how you been? What do you need? Oh, yeah, come on, it's right over here. You're out of there in 5 minutes. And 3 of those minutes were BSing with the guys.
But that's what I like.
Exactly.
Precisely. That attitude of friendliness.
Totally.
That to me is what actually helps commerce flow.
So that's kind of my take, is the encouragement of this local businesses again, and obviously that really plays into the construction industries. Of course, construction industries are an antenna of the real estate industry.
Right.
And so obviously we're finally getting through a lot of inventory, and hopefully now, as scarcity of supply exists, we're going to start a lot of new construction happening